Thanks for having me. I am happy to be here tonight. Couple things. One, I am actually on call this evening as on-call supervisor, so that phone is on. I apologize. We're hoping it doesn't ring. If I have to step out for a second, I should be back shortly. I want to say how impressed I am to see all these folks here and how encouraged I am. We've been working with Missoula Alliance Church and what they've been doing with the state and some of the services they've been providing, and I knew this group existed. I had no idea it existed in this capacity, and it's incredible to see. And I just appreciate each and every one of you that you're here and the time you give, and obviously the dedication and care you have for children, or I know you wouldn't be sitting in these seats and spending a Thursday evening doing this. So it warms my heart. I don't know how else to say it. It's just such an encouraging thing. We need folks like you, and I love seeing that you're here, and that I really hope that you're getting the support that you need, and maybe this is, one venue that can start to happen in, because I know that the role you play is not easy. And there's no way to emphasize that more except that it's a difficult role that you have chosen to take on. And without you, my job, we couldn't do it. It wouldn't exist. And so you are integral to what we do. That being said, I know the relationship between state of Montana, CFS, the department, the division, whatever you want to call us, and foster parents is not always the most seamless one. It's not always the easiest, and I get that. And I mean, that's okay. I want to talk about some of those things tonight. This is not a good venue to go into like personal stories or things that happened well or didn't happen well on a case or things like that, but I do want this to be open dialogue. There's a few themes I really want to hit on and talk about how do I think these relationships can work well. And I want to be open to questions and things like that, but obviously if there's particular things happening on a specific case, we could talk about as a side afterwards, but this just isn't the best place for that. But I get it. I know there's frustrations. I know there's complications. And I really want to say that it's felt on the part of the social workers as well, a lot of times. So as far as I think what we run into a lot, we have systems issues. And that's frustrating for everybody. So I think one of the first places I want to start is just telling you a little bit about the people I work with. So I'm a supervisor with Child and Family Services, and in that role, I supervise anywhere from 5 to 7 workers. It ebbs and flows. And every single one of those people I have supervised, will supervise in the future, I can tell you they care about these kids. And it might not always feel that way, or they might just seem really busy or taxed or have a lot going on. But I watch their hearts, and I see them come into my office, and I see the tears that they shed and the sleep they didn't get the night before because they're worried about an investigation they went on, or a child that's in foster care, a visit that happened between a parent and a child, and they feel it too. And I think they have done a really good job of masking that emotion a lot of times. Like if they're in conversation with you, or you see them in court, or they're at a treatment team meeting, or they're professionals around the table, and just kind of that mask goes on, and they have to be more of a neutral party. But that I see them in that place of vulnerability where this gets to them. Like, this is not easy. It's not an easy job that they're doing. And that they really do care. Doesn't mean we're always going to see eye to eye, but that, just knowing that at the, their intention is good, and that they want to do what's right for these kids. And then I think, reflecting back on sometimes the frustrations we'll have with placement providers, or foster parents, and saying like, oh, why are they doing what they're doing? That's not a decision that I would have agreed with. And knowing that you're making a choice because you also believe in the best interest of those children. You're caring about what you're doing. So just knowing that everyone's sitting around a table, that's where they're coming from. One thing that I want to make sure we touch on is just communication. I think that's probably one of the biggest areas of contention, or where folks get frustrated. Would you agree? Is there times where you're like, I don't feel like I'm getting my needs met? I'm trying to call and I'm not hearing anything back. That would be what I get reflected when I get the voicemails of, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of this worker. I left these 17 voicemails and I haven't heard anything back. Can you get them to call me? And I don't like getting those voicemails either. I would say for most workers, I think that's one of the best conversations you can have upon first meeting a worker is what is the best way to communicate. So what's the best way to communicate with the worker, and what is the best way to communicate with the family? Because that is so different from every single relationship and what that looks like. I will tell you, universally, most workers would prefer email or text messages, and absolutely that can seem impersonal and not the preferred way of communication. For small day-to-day things, you're probably going to get your fastest, best answer that way. Like, hey, I need this field trip permission slip signed. Email that. If you can send a copy via email or things like that, small things. They check their emails regularly, check text messages regularly, so small things like that. I am a huge supporter, and I tell my workers, a text message is not a substitute for a phone call. It's not a substitute for a conversation. And so those phone calls still need to be happening 100%. And, for the big things, and what is this visit going to look like, and they've got this big doctor's appointment that I'm concerned about, things like that. I mean, that's where a phone call needs to be happening. But I will tell you, if you, meet in the middle of some of those other kind of electronic forms of communication, it's usually like a far better response rate in getting what you need. That being said, if you are leaving, multiple voicemails and not getting a call back, like that is what the supervisors are for, and that's what our job is, and you should be giving us a call. And I'd say, give a worker a chance. I think most voicemails say that, they'll get back to you within 2 business days. And that can seem like a long time, and you're the one sitting there with the kid, and you've got the problem, and you need an answer. And that 2 days isn't necessarily an acceptable time period. But I think if you work on kind of like leaving that time frame in your message to, like, hey, this is what's going on, I really need an answer by 5 o'clock today or 8 o'clock tomorrow, or things like that, I think that can really help. Any questions around like communication or thoughts or comments?
The nice thing about texting is even if they're in a meeting, they can still text a response, so that's been very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that can be a really good way to get those quick little communications across. Anybody else? Okay. So the other thing I kind of want to talk about, and I don't think people are ignorant to this, but I think it is like something we just don't spend a lot of time thinking about, is the fact that the job of CFS, our job, I mean, it's government, but we're run by law. Everything we do is, legislaturally approved. We read the Montana Code annotated. That's the law we're governed under. That's where policy comes from. So when things come along and we say we can't do this, or we have to do it this way, sometimes it's policy and sometimes it's more flexible, and like we talked about, but a lot of times what we're doing is we're governed by law, and they're just really there's not a lot of free choice in it. So whether the worker agrees with it or disagrees with it, they are following the law. So you think about it, everything we do when we're involved, if you folks are involved, we have a foster placement or a kinship placement, what that looks like, it means that we've had to initiate a legal proceeding with a family. That's a huge deal. It's not criminal, it's a civil case, but it still is, governed in that same manner. Everything goes to the judge, every parent has an attorney, children have their attorneys, CASA is involved sometimes, and all that is a legal proceeding. It's a legal matter that we have to go through. So those are the things we're taking into account when we're making decisions. And I would say, being able to separate the worker from like who they might be as a person and what they might, feel or believe in or, want to advocate for, and then who they are as a worker and what as an employee for the department, this is what I know the law allows, this is what policy says, and so this is what the steps I have to follow. And I think that can be really, really frustrating for families, and I can understand that it's frustrating for me at times. But the idea that at the end of the day, we have to answer to a judge. Like everything we do, we will go in front of a judge and say, Your Honor, I took these steps, and these are the reasons I did that. And he or she are going to, say that was right or wrong. Or sometimes plain out like illegal. That wasn't something we could do. We're going to be in trouble for for making a decision we did. So it's just a really good context to remember when we're having those conversations is like, and I would encourage you to have that conversation with workers as far as, like, where does this come from? Is this a policy? Is this a CFS policy? Is this something we can talk about? Is there exceptions to it? What does that look like? Or is this something that's being, told by, like, Montana Code annotated the law? This is the way things have to go. Questions or thoughts around that? Okay. So along those lines, I think another piece that we run into is when we talk about budget or money or paying for things. And and the things I'm highlighting is what I come to mind when I think about what kind of conversations do I have with foster parents most often? Where do I see the difficulty? Where do I see the rub? Like what's frustrating? And money, I think, is one of those key pieces. It's not necessarily something that's comfortable to talk about or to broach, but it's there, it exists, it's real, and it has a huge piece to play when you're trying to raise a child, because that is not free. And so times when does the department help? When don't we help? And why is that? So it's a huge conversation I can't even go to. I can't pretend to understand that I know what our budget is or what exactly that looks like. But I can tell you that at the worker level, it's an even less of an understanding. Workers are able to approve very, very, very little. So if you don't feel like you're getting, a satisfactory answer, you're not, if you're asking for something, if you're asking for assistance, and a worker is saying, I don't know, or I have to ask my supervisor, or, no, they have the very limited flexibility of what they're able to say yes to, unless it's something that's very pre-approved and we always pay for, and we know that if you're sitting there in a home visit and they're talking with you, they're not going to be able to say yes to something. That being said, so then they come to me and they say, hey, can we pay for this? And I say, oh, I don't know, maybe. And then I usually have to go ask my boss. So it's this chain of command with money that never makes it simple. And having to constantly take into account kind of like, what's the goal? Where are we at? The questions I always am asked is the family, are they licensed? Are they not licensed? Are they kinship? Are they, like, what does that look like? What are the funding sources already available to them? How do we help use the natural supports that are in the community? Which with, MAC Church has been huge for some of those gaps that we have been unable to, fill in the past. So that's been really helpful. But so just knowing that if you're feeling frustrated with that worker sitting there in front of you in your house, they can't say yes. They don't know. They don't have the permission. If they came back and told me, oh yeah, I said we'd pay for this $300 field trip, I'm probably not going to be so happy at that point either. And then I'm probably calling you to tell you, well, no, sorry, that was not an accurate piece of information. So I would just encourage that if you're feeling like you're not getting the answer you need, or that the worker doesn't have the information, that, again, it's another thing. Call a supervisor, talk with us. Even then, a lot of times, like I said, I have to call my boss, but there's just limited things that they really can approve within that setting. Thoughts, comments, questions around that? Yeah.
Talking about all of what you do, or most of what you do, is governed by the law. Are there guidelines on the financial stuff that parents can, foster families can have access to, so they kind of have an idea what you do cover? Is there any policy like that that's available?
It's a good question. I don't think there's any policy specifically that says that. So what I can tell you, what policy says is that when there is a child in an unlicensed home, so a kinship home, whether that's someone who's biologically blood related or someone who had a previous relationship with that kid, and that's why they're in your home, your neighbors, teacher, friend, when that home is unlicensed, we are not supposed to pay for any services, or there's we can't provide clothing allowance, we can't provide a diaper allowance, we can't provide any of like that monthly stipend money until a home is licensed. Those are the things we are definitely not allowed to do. What we do encourage families, or what we can work with, is getting child-only TANF. So that's something that you access through the Office of Public Assistance. So it's money that's for the child. It's not based on a family's income that has that child. And WIC, depending on the age of the child. Food stamps, depending on the income of the family. And Medicaid. Children in foster care are all eligible for Medicaid, depending on, or I mean, not dependent on a family structure, income, or what that looks like. But so though that's the policy. That's what it would say, is we cannot offer financial assistance. We can't offer assistance with respite care, things like that, until a family is licensed. That being said, there's things we try to do, such as a gas card if you're doing, excessive amount of transportation for visits, things like that. If things really are, this is the home, this is where we need the kids, and things are really tight, can we get a card to Safeway, something to, Walmart, just like what can we do to tide over that time before the family gets licensed and can start receiving that financial support. So I can't sit here and offer a guarantee, but if we can make a case for it, we really try to, and to get some of those services in place. But it's not going to be ever like a check issued by the state until a family is licensed. Other questions or thoughts?
Do the laws about the financial downflow change often? Is that part of the confusion of, that people don't know, what, like you having to ask your boss, or really the circumstances that surround that specific child?
It's all about the circumstances that surround that specific child. I mean, since I've been with the agency, which is about 4 years, like I haven't seen any of that change as far as like, like the licensed versus unlicensed homes, like what can or can't you provide. I could tell you our budget kind of ebbs and flows, and so like if I'm allowed to, issue a gas card or ask for a gift card to a grocery store or things like that, there's times when it feels like I'm going to get that yes if I go ahead and ask for it, and times where I'm going to get that no. But yes, it's very, very, very like circumstantial to the child and to the family, and where are we at and what does that look like. Other thoughts? Yeah.
What current financial resources are available in the transition program for the system?
You're going to tax my brain here. So they're with the Transitional Living Services, and that's currently, we contract out, so kiddos who, well, it's 15 now, over to 14 and a half, I believe. Yeah, there you go. That reach that age, they're eligible for what's called Transitional Living Services. It's not run through the state. It's a contract that the state has. And so there's various things that is budgeted for those folks to pay for. So some of those things can be different driver's license classes. What else are things some online classes, books, things like that, if a kid's doing not as an alternative, or doing an alternative type of schooling. Let's say they need to get a uniform for work. That's a type of service that can be paid for. So the state has set out that budget in that contract, but what has to happen is the TLS worker, they submit a request for reimbursement to the state. So it's something that's like has to get pre-approved through the state, and then they get the money to do that. But I don't know if there's like a specific budget amount on a particular child, or how that works exactly.
I don't think there is. I was just in Helena at a training and heard from the newest program director for that program. I think it changes year to year, and like just this last year it was kind of a I guess, a bonus year in a way. They had a lot of money left over, and they were able to pay 2 students who were graduating college. They paid off their student loans.
Wow.
That doesn't happen often, like hardly ever. So I would just say it kind of is super variable, but I think it's worth requesting those types of things because the money's there. So.
And who's contracting that right now?
I didn't even ask that. Well, in Missoula, it's through Dan Talks.
Yeah. Do you know who it is?
They've changed. I forget the 2 workers. There's 2 of them now because when they upped it to, or lowered it to 14, they needed more help. So there's 2 of them. They're on the website. I can tell you that.
Andrea Graham.
What was that?
Andrea Graham is one of
That
them.
is, yeah.
We just talked to her and she said that if your kiddo is not adopted
Yeah, if it's
until they're 16 or not adopted, but in your care, they get, I think is it $5,000 per year for continuing education.
I don't know the breakdown because I think that's what changes year to year depending on how much money they have. But there is special things that you can request beyond that. But it's a great program. I would say if any of you have teens, that's actually something he wanted people to be doing is recruiting for that program specifically because they're not full.
That's great.
By any means. So, yeah.
Do we contact them or is the state referring out?
State refers. So contact the assigned social worker if that referral hasn't been sent in. Other thoughts around this piece? Visits. I know that's not an easy part of the job of a foster parent usually. Visits between parents or caregivers. Who did we remove the child from? We are mandated, first and foremost, when we remove a child from their home, their caregiver, their parent, what that looks like, we are, plan A is reunification, and that is the plan we work from day 1 until day termination hearing happens, and it's said that kid is, the parents no longer have rights. It will look different from case to case what that means when we're working reunification. How long we work reunification will vary depending on the case and what parents are doing and what that looks like. But that is our mandate, and that is one of the most important things that we do, and it's part of the mission that we believe in or we wouldn't do this job, is that people can change, that where kids do the best is within their biological families, with their parents. And that if we can do that in a safe way, that is where kids need to be. We're not successful in that mission, which is why we look for concurrent families who can adopt, families that we can have permanency with. But that is first and foremost our goal when working with these kids and working with these families. I think that can seem really hard, and it can seem like it's not in the children's best interest sometimes. You're bringing a kid to the visit, they don't want to go, and they're crying, and then you know that when they come back home, you have a tantrum ahead of you, they're not going to sleep well, you're going to have night terrors, it's going to be the next day of dysregulation, and then finally things are going to smooth out, and guess what? It's time for another visit. I hear this time and time again. It's not easy. It's not an easy process. We do look at what's in the children's, we probably don't see eye to eye, but we try to look at what's in the children's best interest in facilitating those visits. And when it appears that the visit is for the parent, like who are we serving? Who is this visit for? And if it seems to be for the parent only, that's the time when we need to look at, scaling back visits, having them look different, taking them to a different setting perhaps. But even when children are having that real emotional reaction, that doesn't mean it's not beneficial to them or that it's not important to them. And then making these huge blanket statements. And I know that every single case is different and how a child is reacting is different. But seeing a parent is hard when you're not living with them, and all the questions that comes up, and how old is the child, and are they able to talk about their feelings? Are we pretty little, or are we at an age where we can articulate some of the stuff that's going on? even if you are older, how do you define feelings that you don't really understand what they are? I don't know what's happening, all that division of, yeah, it was really good to see mom, but guess what, I feel really safe when I'm here, and all that kind of divided loyalty that happens. So I think Missoula has an interesting legal community in that we have a high burden to live up to. And I don't think this is a bad thing. I think it's good, but that with the attorneys that we work with, particularly for parents, and the judges that we work with, they expect us to really push forward with visitation to work on those reunification efforts. The term that's used legally is reasonable efforts, in some cases active efforts, that we have to be able to show in court. These are the things we did to try to make this relationship work, to try to get this child back into their home. And a big part of those efforts is visitation. I know that can be really difficult in a lot of different situations, but I think, and I don't know that our foster care training touches on this, and I know it touches on it, but something to even emphasize more of the fact that visits in most cases will happen, they need to happen, and that we are working towards reunification. So what does that mean as a foster parent to be in kind of that dual role of both? So part of me is saying, hey, we're working towards reunification with parent, like we gotta do all these things to do that, but if that doesn't work out, could you adopt this kid? So please, sit here and get really connected and bond and do all those types of things. But don't forget we're working reunification. Oh, but will you adopt? But work reunification. And so we're kind of saying we are saying both those same things. We're working two tracks at the same time. And that's not easy for, it's not easy for birth parents. It's not easy for foster parents. It can be difficult to do in the department. We forget. Sometimes we get real on the reunification and then we forget that, oh, wait, we didn't do anything on the plan B. And sometimes we focus a lot on plan B and we really think we know which way a case is going. And maybe we give false promises or say oh, I don't think mom's going to be able to do this. I really think we need to start looking towards adoption. And then we get, a turnaround on plan A. We're like, oh, never mind. I think this kid's going to go over here. And so I think that's a really, really difficult thing. But when we're talking about, this is just not an issue that we're ever going to get away from. Visitation is going to happen, and it needs to happen. I think in some cases people see it as being very beneficial, but even when it's in that hard place, it's something that we're probably going to keep pushing to until the day that we say to the judge, hey, this isn't in the best interest of the kids anymore. Basically, can we have permission to stop doing this? Thoughts or questions around that? Yeah.
How long do you usually work toward reunification?
Good question. It can definitely depend on the case. There's very, very rare cases where right from the gate we say this isn't in the best interest of the children. So that would be in very, very severe, significant abuse cases. It usually doesn't work. So generally speaking, what happens is we ask for temporary legal custody for a period of 6 months. During that 6 months, parents get a treatment plan, tasks that they need to accomplish to be able to get their children back into their care. That 6 months, things usually never are we done and over within that 6 months. Even if a parent can get their child back into their care in that time, we're asking for a 6-month time period that they're back home and that everything's okay. But so we ask for this first period of 6 months. During that time, there's a lot of court, there's a lot of it's usually pretty active, a lot of things changing, trying to get parents engaged in services, trying to get those visits up and going, getting kids into services that they need, a lot of different things happening. At the end of that 6 months, if parents aren't in a place to be reunified or that the case isn't done, we ask for another 6 months. During that second 6 months, that's like a real assessment period. That's where kind of all that chaos at the beginning is over. Hopefully you've gotten some evaluations done. Folks are really just ready to start working on what they need to. So we take that second 6 months and look at how are things going? Are parents making the progress that they need to? Are we addressing the concerns of why we remove children in the first place? Or are we just so far down the other side? And it's usually within kind of that second 6 month period that things make themselves a lot clearer as to what direction the case is going to go. So around the 12-month mark, I mean, this is like all an estimation, but that we start to make those decisions about, is it in the child's best interest to move towards a permanency option of adoption or guardianship, or does it make sense, or are the parents ready for reunification? Yeah. Nope, you're good.
Thinking about the conversation about business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're in a lucky spot right now that we have really good relationships with both of our families' final parents, which makes it a whole heck of a lot easier on the kids to have visits and come back because the kids see that the parents are okay with it. And I don't know, just thinking of training and I know other cases different too, but just that being able to bridge or build some sort of relationship between the foster parents and the birth parents would go so much further in supporting those kids in placement, even if they're going back and forth. And birth parents can be okay with them being where they're at, and that the foster parents can be okay sending them off. It's just it's a different visit system than some cases that we've had have house of a different relationship that we have with both sides of the parents.
Sort of tag on to
Yeah.
that. Oftentimes visits with the department have often felt like Planet Kids visits, where you go in the front door and I don't know how many of you have ever worked with that system, but one parent goes in the front door, leaves the kid, it's a double set of doors. The other parent comes in the back door, it's a double set of doors. You don't ever see each other. Just to sort of build on that, I talk about BFS and I work with BFS and it's really schizophrenic. And just that system of sort of never having a pathway where, our foster parents always want to know what's the house like, where are the kids at, are their needs getting met, and I don't think that that's addressed very well in sort of the structure that the visits exist in there. And that what ends up happening then is parents go to kids. Where are you at? What's happening? What's your room look like? And so sometimes I just feel like that's a lost piece in training.
And I think that's a really good point. And it's even just you say that as you describe, I'm like, yeah, that is how it looks a lot. And just that lack of interaction between foster parents and bio parents.
I think it's especially, we have a different view when we're younger too, but you go into that stereotypical birth parents must be bad. That fear, and one of the other foster parents we work with our family, like, she's terrified of having the birth parents know her phone number or where they live. And we have a totally different experience with the same birth parents. So, we've discussed having over for Thanksgiving dinner. Like, there's nothing to be afraid of. And yes, there's some differences in culture, but let's try to bridge that. So.
And I mean, your point is well said and well made. I think it varies from family to family what you feel comfortable with or in. Absolutely, I would promote when kids can maintain relationships with both, whether it goes one way or the other. So reunification isn't possible. They need to stay with their foster family, but can they continue that relationship with a birth parent when it's safe, when it's appropriate, what that looks like, and that could change how the child's life. But vice versa. I've seen some absolutely incredible relationships develop from folks who cared for kids for a period of time. They were able to go back home with mom or dad or whomever, and that relationship stayed there, that the children were still able to see their foster parents. They use them as respite, hey, I need a babysitter for this weekend, or to build up such a trusting relationship that, mom would be able to call and be like, I'm having a hard time, I don't know how to do this, my car broke down, I'm not sure how to get kid to school tomorrow, can you help me out with that? I've seen some of that really incredible work happen. But it's not going to work in every relationship, and it's just it's what people are comfortable with. But I would say it's something to challenge yourself with, of like, where am I at? Where do I feel comfortable? What are my thoughts around this family that I'm taking care of their kids for? And that's going to look so different to whether if you had a previous relationship, if this is a kinship placement or like a stranger foster care type of situation.
When we were taking foster care classes, it had been mentioned that some foster parents open a Facebook for the child, and we were thinking about that, and on one hand we thought, well, that kind of opens them up maybe to the world, we don't want that. But on the other hand, the parents really don't know how we live, and we think that we would really like insight to what happens on a daily basis and things that we do with them. So do we have to get permission from our worker to open a Facebook for a child?
So no kid in state care can be on Facebook. And so is there anything different that you guys are talking about at the training?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
It's been contracted out the last few times, so I can't necessarily speak to that. But it varies. If there's PLC, that's totally different.
Yes.
But if we only have temporary legal custody, the parent still has the right to say what their child can do. We just have to be really extra cautious about what's displayed. I guess is the easiest way. And I, of course, when in doubt, always ask permission.
So but I have a Facebook and then post, is my grandson, my grandson has a girl post pictures of him on my Facebook?
We typically have said no.
Yeah, I was gonna, licensing rules would say, or my understanding, and even when you say that right now, it feels different, but no, if the state has temporary legal custody of a child, they are not supposed to be published on the internet in any form, whether...
Not even cloud, not
right.
any of that.
Is that in licensing rules, or is there some sort of side policy? 'Cause I searched one time.
It's not. It's not necessarily in policy.
It's just being called best practice.
Okay.
Because when I looked one time, there's nothing that I could find that says thou shall not.
So, and I don't think it's any of the licensing rules that we sign.
We got told that thou shall not.
You're right. It is not on the 10-page contract that we signed. You're right.
Okay.
So I think it has to do with best practice, but it also has to do probably with legal stuff.
But can the parents post pictures of the kids when they're on a visit? So that's.
But they're still the parent legally.
Okay.
I mean, well, yes and no. They're temporarily not, but still have their rights. Does that make sense?
So if we were guardians, the parents' rights haven't been terminated, and you still can't do a Facebook because the parents' rights haven't been terminated?
No, I think guardianship is a different situation.
Guardianship is totally different. If you have guardianship, you have the right to do that.
Okay, so basically make no news unless our worker knows.
Yeah, you just have to be careful because anything is possible, especially on the
I thought it would be helpful for them to see, how he's doing so that.
And I was going to say too, some of the older youth, they have Facebook and they've been given, sometimes it's just a battle, you can't win.
Our world of social media, it's all over the place. So how can you use that technology for good instead of evil?
Yeah.
And I would be honest to say, as things evolve, I could see that being one of those policies that gets updated, or that it's gonna.
That might be changing. So they're in the process of rewriting a bunch of documents that aren't done, and part of some federal policy that has changed is incorporated into some of those rewrites, and so we don't have all of that information to date, but that might be something that is changing. So in the past resource book, it was a bright yellow book that was given to a lot of people. I believe that's where some of the Facebook stuff, I probably didn't say Facebook because it was very outdated. Some of that was in that document, but you're right, I don't think it's specifically laid out in policy.
What about emailing? Email pictures?
You could email is much more private, so that would be...
Yeah, and you could make a separate, if you didn't want them to have your personal email, you could make it separate Google email that is like an extra.
Like a Google Drive and share the pictures.
Unless you are instructed by the worker that none of that contact should be happening. That would be...
Right. I know I had a question over here.
Yes, we've had kids, we have this placement for the last 11 months now around. And so for the first, 10 months we were just teaching them good behaviors, how to be brothers and sisters. And now it's looking like they're going home, and so I'm kind of torn. I caught myself the other day. I was saying to the oldest of them, you need to use everything we taught you and apply it, so then that way you can go home, so that way it's easier for you to go home. And so I'm torn, do I? Because what if plan A? Because it looks like plan A is going. What if plan B doesn't? So how much what do you recommend? I don't. like I felt like I should have like bite my tongue. Like maybe I shouldn't be trying to coach him to act this way to go home when really I'm just trying to teach him life skills. And then I feel like, well, what if I like word it wrong and then he doesn't go home and then it's a hard battle for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and like you picked up on exactly like what my concern would be, or what I would caution you against. So say that we ever attribute that anything a child does has any impact on whether they do or do not return home, and that it's constantly emphasizing that it's not about them, it's about mom or dad, or like that. Those are the people. Like, they've got things they need to do, and they've got work to do, but that's where the onus is, that's where the responsibility is. Yeah, so I'd be careful how you word that or phrase that, talk about like, these are behaviors we learn, like this is how we should treat our brothers and sisters. This is how it's good to lurk in a family, this is what it's good to look like in a home, but yeah, not tying it to, if we don't look like that, if we don't do that, you might not be able to go home.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's tough because like a lot of their turmoil they cause between each other makes it hard for the parent to be a parent, and so like I want to kind of coach them, but I'm like I don't think this doesn't feel right.
Right. If they're out of control, it can be hard for parents to do what they need to do, but for sure. I mean, I think you got it. You know it. You see it. I know you had. Oh, yeah.
I was wondering for like Facebook, can you get a release form from the parents? To be able to, like Christmas pictures and stuff sharing, can you get a release date?
I just don't know. I would say it's probably possible, or something you could put into a written agreement, but I guess I would speak, specifically with the caseworker and the case and what that would look like. It's something I feel like I'd have to talk to my, regional administrator and say like, how much would we need to cover us, or, talk to our attorneys and make sure that we weren't doing anything that could get us into trouble. Yeah.
There was a question about the time frame.
Yeah.
Reunification and termination. Can you talk about the statutory 22-month, 15-month?
Yep.
How you guys work with those?
Yep. So the Adoption and Safe Families Act, we call it ASFA, was enacted in 1997, I think. So under that federal guideline, federal policy is that it is believed that if a child remains in out-of-home care for 15 out of the past 22 months, it is in the child's best interest to terminate parental rights. So they give that time frame of 15 out of 22 so that, if you had to do the math, so a kid's out of home for 4 months, they go home for 2 months, it didn't work, they leave the home again for 10 months, where are we at? So you do math under a 22-month period. Most cases are a little bit more cut and dry in that a child leaves their home, they're unable to return, and we hit a 15-month mark. So underneath ASPA, so it's saying that it's implied, it's supposed to put a limitation on cases that they just can't carry out for forever. It's kind of like, that's the mark that's been set. If we hit 15 months and reunification doesn't look like it's going to be a possibility, we are mandated then to file a petition for termination of parental rights. There are situations in which we can do an exception to that. But so at that 15-month mark, let's pretend a kid left home and never returned, and we're at 15 months. There's one of two things has to happen. We either file a petition of termination of parental rights, or we ask for an exception. So there's a few scenarios in which we can ask for an exception to ASPA. Most primarily of those being that a child is placed with kin, that's considered a kinship placement, or that we believe that within a reasonable period of time the parent would be ready and available to parent, that we could start a trial home visit. But one of those two things should be happening at that 15-month mark. Does that answer your question?
So, I'm just trying to apply this to my own knowledge. In any point in time in that 22-month period, we've had the experience that a judge overrules that petition, and then we've been told it starts all over. Like, that timeline.
Go back to zero.
Yeah.
Months.
is it a different, like, has a new case been started, or truly the termination petition was filed and the judge said no, and
It was going to be filed, it was planned on being
Uh-huh.
filed, and then court happened, some emergency situations came up, and the judge decided, you know what, we're just gonna start over.
So no, I mean,
Sumner Valley County.
I mean, there's no such thing. You can't like start the clock over. If a case ended, if one case ended, children went home, they were reunified, and the case was closed, we dismissed, and then we had to a new case 6 months later. Concerns popped up, kids had to leave. That's a whole new case, whole new time frame. The old case does influence it, but that's the only time when like you're back to zero. Judges say things. They say some really interesting things sometimes, but I mean, I would be, no, it's like not all over again, but you probably have to put some time for it again, because if they're saying no today, then they're probably going to say no in a month and no in 2 months, so having to bide some time again. But I mean, it is law.
So can kinship care just last forever?
Like that the department like maintains custody, like temporary legal custody.
I mean, can it just go, like let's say parents have mental health issues, and kinship care basically just go on forever?
I think.
Or how long does it go on before they finally say a termination?
So one of the other options that can exist is guardianship. So no, we do not want kids just staying in temporary. We could ask for temporary legal custody for 6 months, and then another extension, and then another extension, and another extension. We could, and keep saying, well, this is why we shouldn't terminate. This is why we shouldn't terminate. That's not how we operate. That's not our philosophy or mission or values. But so that would be looking for permanency for that child. So another option is guardianship. So under guardianship, parents maintain their parental rights. They still have them, but the kinship provider has guardianship so that they are the caretaker. They have all those parental rights and authority of making all the caretaking decisions, and what that looks like. And for a parent to reassume care of the children, they have to petition a judge for that and say, here's all the things that have changed. This is why I should have custody of my kids again. But their rights remain intact throughout that process.
So would the guardian be in control of the visitation, and they have to be the supervisor position?
They're in charge of the visitation, whatever that looks like. It could be entirely appropriate in a situation that there doesn't need to be a supervisor, or that yes, you as a guardian decide you would be the best supervisor, or you use an outside agency such as Planet Kids or a mutual friend or what have you. But it's just, as a guardian, it's your right to decide what that looks like for that family, what's best for those kids.
I also want to add that if a parent or both parent petitions the court, the department does get notified. So the department can step up in.
They can?
They can, yes.
Do they?
Yeah. We have one recently that just happened.
Do they always step up in?
Well, we look at the situation. If the situation is okay, I think that's one thing. But if the situation is not okay, most definitely. But so the reason for that is some families, I think, have the viewpoint. This is a way to get the state out of the picture, and then we'll do what we need to do or want to do in our own family and fix it kind of on our own. But sometimes that's still not safe for the child. I mean, some circumstances maybe it is, but the department does get notified.
I think we have about 5 minutes left.
So we've had 2 placements. One was a voluntary placement, and one was involuntary, and they looked way different in terms of communication from our case manager. Is that normal, or is it case, and it's been 2 different caseworkers?
That's what I was going to ask.
So is it independent, or is it?
I would say yes, I'm sure.
More communication during our voluntary placement. I talked to her once via text. That was it.
During your voluntary placement was only? So I would, if I was going to hypothesize, I would have gone the other direction. But no, I would say it's very much caseworker dependent, that communication. It shouldn't be, whether it's a voluntary or an involuntary placement.
Would you talk about the structure that you're moving to or returning to?
Yeah, that's a great thing to bring up. So, a little bit of history. About 5 some years ago, so the department used to operate that. So it's kind of like two subsets of the job. The first is to go out and investigate reports, determine whether or not children are safe in their homes. The second one being if we said, oh, kids aren't safe, we need to initiate a legal action, we're getting court involved, then is to work a legal case. So everything we've been talking about tonight. Two very different pieces of the job that have we've been operating as one. So before, what we did was folks would just go out and do investigations, and if they had to remove a kid, these other workers would come and they'd run the legal aspect of the cases. About 5 years ago, we switched that. We went to a model called one worker, one case. So being that if a worker went out, they found a child, they investigated a report, found a child to be unsafe, they remain the worker throughout the entirety of the case. So they would have removed the kid and then initiated the legal action and then worked with the parents and towards reunification or termination. There's evidence out there that that's best practice for families that towards reunification and for case cohesion. The reality being, and what we're seeing, it's not exclusive to Montana, but it's such high turnover rates with our workers that is no such thing as one worker, one case. It's like 5 workers, one case, because we have so many workers circulating through. So, not working. So very recently, we have gone back to the transition's not complete. We were given the authority by the upper ups that, hey, every single office across the state, make the decision for yourself. Which way does your office best operate? Is it one worker, one case? Is it back to these very two separate, this worker does reports and this worker does a legal case, or somewhere in between those two spectrums? So in Missoula, we decided to go back to workers who are focused solely on taking reports and doing the investigation side, and workers who are focused solely on doing the legal side of cases. What we are doing in that model is creating pods so that a supervisor oversees workers who are, a couple workers who are doing reports and a couple workers who are doing the legal cases, with the ideal being that if a worker was to remove a child within this pod, then the worker who assumes that case is also in that pod. So the supervisor stays the same and there's more knowledge being crossed between, or knowledge not being lost within that transfer of that case. What that might seem for like those who are doing foster care, getting those calls from caseworkers, is that it's more of the same caseworker. It's a little bit more consistent, and that hopefully the caseworker you're having contact with is a little bit more educated or feels a little bit more confident on that end of the work that they're doing, because it's much more exclusive. They can focus on that legal end of things. The intensive services unit, yep, there's still 2 positions of those. Yeah.
Should add the other case load of 10, so it's just tip of the iceberg. And it can be any kiddo from anywhere in the state. So it's not just
Yeah.
They're seeing good outcomes from what I hear.
That they are. I wish we could cap everybody at 10 cases. You'd have more communication. I can tell you that. So with switching to this model and our current staffing, workers will have about 17 cases and about 35 kids on their caseload. Yes, it is.
I was just going to say, this is why you need to be political, because the whole reason that budget exists because your legislature approves that budget. And it's a fiscally conservative legislation that cuts off kids and kids services. And that is terrible.
As a special education teacher, I mean, in the schools that we would have, that's just.
Yeah, and I mean that's how our current staffing, and we're down workers. No, I completely understand. So ideally, as if we were to be fully staffed in our office, those numbers would go down, but that's about the average we're working on right now.
Is it because they're not fully staffed because you can't keep people hired, or
No, it's because we can't, because of our turnover rates.
If you were full staffed, what would your
I think we were saying that it was going to be around 12 to 13 cases. and like around 25 kids.
So you're saying there's the money to have the caseworkers, but nobody wants to be there? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, that's probably one way to say it.
But again, that goes back to finances. I mean, you have to go to the legislature to get a raise. So this summer, we went to the legislature to talk about why we needed a raise. So again, our jobs are political too, and you need to be advocates for your workers. And so we picketed signs, and don't tell anyone, we put signs in our kids' hands. Don't tell anyone. And sent them to our workers.
Oh, so
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, we were only in the bell of the Capitol when we took that picture. But we were there, and I think as a community, these are the places where we need to be advocates for your office, because we get the benefit of that. So.
Absolutely.
When there's going to be a hearing or anything like that when it comes to child protective services?
Foster parents should be notified. I think we do a very poor job of that. It's something to keep on your radar then, and as much as it shouldn't be your responsibility, making it your responsibility in some ways if you're not hearing about it. I know when I was a caseworker, it was something I did a terrible job about too. If foster parents weren't present in the courtroom, that I forgot to call afterwards, be like, oh, hey, this is what happened at court, and it's scheduled, for 2 months. So just make a point of asking that question. But foster parents, yes, you should be notified, and you are welcome to every single court hearing involving those children that are in your care.
Afterwards, we're in the case right now, I wouldn't step foot in that courtroom. The bio parents just have become very nasty. And they've caused a lot of very unsafe things to happen.
Yeah.
So.
But those are your rights, so definitely know that.
Just a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, like, being a caseworker, do you guys get a lot of threats, and is it pretty hard sometimes?
From foster parents,
or? Like when you go in there to take a kid out of their house and stuff, I imagine that being such a hard job.
It's a very hard job. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those reasons we have turnover. There's so many reasons we have turnover, right? We could talk about that for the next 8 hours, which we're not going to. But it's emotionally draining. I don't know that there's that many threats. People say things, they're angry, and that's, you can usually take it with that kind of grain of salt. But yeah, it's not an easy thing. People don't like you very much. There is a lot of angry voicemails, a lot of angry phone calls. Yeah.
I do know in one of our cases, the bio mom made some threats, and our caseworkers said the cops were almost called in.
And that absolutely can happen. Yeah.
Andrea, thank you. I have been in this position for just over a year, and I think the biggest learning curve I've had is just the appreciation for the child protective services workers. I don't think I had any clue prior to this job what they were required to do, on the spot they have to be, the life and death decisions really that you guys are making, and I think just as a community as a whole, we just don't really truly appreciate that. And so that is one thing that I have just really been able to increase my knowledge about, and so I appreciate you being here, and we appreciate you.
So, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.